Today we are talking about horses, specifically how horses handle the cold and what you can do to help them handle a harsh winter. I'm going to be going over feed and diet in young and old horses alike. We're going to be looking at shelter needs, foot care, rugging, and how to put purpose to the partnership on the homestead. We're also going to be looking at a small injury and what to do and what not to do, so stick around for that until the end. And if that all sounds good to you, let's jump in. This past 2 weeks we've had temperatures here in Missouri hit the lowest since the 1970s, and we've been battling wind chill temperatures of -30, which they told me was colder than in Fairbanks, Alaska. I'm going to go and check on the horses, and I'm going to show you some things that we have done to try and keep the horses comfortable. So believe it or not, horses are actually able to withstand cold conditions better than cows. A comfortable temperature for a horse is between 18 and 59 degrees Fahrenheit, but in the absence of wind and wet conditions, a healthy horse with a good coat can tolerate temperatures to just below zero, which is -17 in Celsius. However, when they do have access to shelter, they can tolerate temperatures as low as -40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the same in Celsius. They've been out in this for a good couple hours. When we stable them, they're actually stabled separately just because we're still setting up the infrastructure on our homestead now. So it's important for them to be able to socialize, but I'm going to take them in so that they can have a bit of respite out of these conditions. So the older horse goes in here. He's definitely got a lower body score, a lower condition on his body score. So in here, he's out of the wind, he can stay dry. We have bedding for him to be able to lay down. You can see my chickens like to be in here during the day. I've got eggs right there, and he has as much hay as he can eat. Horses get their energy from digesting fiber, so you want to offer high fiber foods. Older horses can be inefficient in eating hay because they lose the ability to grind it well, to grind their food with their teeth. So serving them a meal of a high fiber food that can be served as a mash is something that can help to keep the calories getting into their body. So what I use, Timothy grass, is very high in fiber, very high in digestible fiber. Something else is that we need to provide a water source that doesn't freeze. Horses won't drink if the water is too cold. And if they're not drinking, then what happens is that they'll get impacted stool and they won't pass their manure as easily. And so that's something that you've got to watch out for in cold temperatures, that they have a water source. So these kind of buckets can be bought, from farm and home. In a stable, I actually prefer a smaller bucket, because the bigger buckets tend to get full of debris and straw. So a smaller bucket is good because it means that you actually are changing it more regularly. Okay, so my old guy behind us, he's going to put himself in the stable. I've got the young guy with me here. Tell you how cold it is. My hands are so cold. I've got 2 pairs of gloves on. I've got to go back in the house to warm up because it's starting to get really painful. So something you can do for horses is you can put rugs on them. Don't leave it until the last moment to put the rug on. If your horse is not used to rugs, like with everything, it takes some training to get them used to it. I'm just going to use this body brush to get some of this snow off his back. Rugs do need reproofing, just like anything, any material that gets wet. So you can put on a proofing spray. There are many different types of rug that you can use for many different reasons, and with this older horse who has a lower body condition, I'm using it primarily to keep him dry and give him a wind break. So just by getting this excess snow off, it'll stop it melting and soaking through. He's got 2 rugs on. The top one hasn't been re-proofed. The underneath one has got a proofing spray on. With a horse that's been habituated to the environment and the climate and who has a healthy body score, shouldn't need a rug unless he is showing particular signs of being cold, such as shivering. And this is the case with the youngster that we have, who we will go and see to in a moment. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to towel dry my horse's head. Again, it's not something that all horses are going to tolerate straight off the bat. You have to train them and expose them to having, but I think if you take the time it takes, then it eventually takes less time. So I don't need to spend hours faffing with a towel and get my horse to be used to it if it's something that I've habituated him to over time. So just to explain a bit more about the body score index, is a range used by equestrians and veterinarians to represent the condition of the horse. So it ranges from 1 to 9, where at 1 the body score is extremely thin, and at 9 the horse is extremely fat. In both situations, the dietary needs of the horse are not being served correctly and need to be addressed. You should be aiming for a mid-range body score. What I'm trying to do is just flick it off him so that it doesn't actually press soak in. He's got oil on his coat, which helps waterproof him. So I don't want to be rubbing the snow in, just more flicking it off. I'm currently building an online course for beginner equestrians, which has lessons teaching the how-to on all the nutritional needs of a horse. So if you're subscribed to the channel, stay tuned for upcoming information on that, and send me an email using the address in the description box below. Horses eat about 2% of their body weight per day in hay. So if you know the average weight of your horse, you can calculate what his daily hay requirement would be. And especially in winter, you want to make sure that the hay is readily available, since it is the main source of his calorie intake. The hay that we serve is a meadow hay. There are different types of grasses in meadow hay. Some grasses are more palatable to horses than others. So you will find that they do pick through hay, and they will discard a lot of the stems and stalks and grasses that they don't like.
Good job, video girl. Here, we're going to take this out of the way. Here you go, honey. Honey, just a minute. Stay right here. Stand behind me.
To avoid too much waste, we keep a big compost pile, so it all gets recycled back into the garden eventually and helps to build our soil quality for growing food. Also, it's important to know that from year to year, different grasses will creep into fields. Like this year, we had a lot of clover growing in the fields, and that might be a great thing for honeybees, but it's not such a good thing for horses. It can actually produce an excessive salivation response in horses. So keeping an eye on which grasses are in the fields and knowing what is in your hay is important. We do make hay available in both the field and in the horses' stalls. Horses will graze typically for 16 hours a day, and they have a digestive system that is set up where there is a constant stomach acid present. So if they don't have that trickle grazing effect happening, then they can be prone to stomach ulcers. So unlike us, who would need 3 meals a day, horses need to be constantly, slowly grazing to stay healthy. So let's talk about a horse's coat. A horse will change out his coat twice a year to adapt to different temperatures, and he'll grow a longer, thicker hair in winter, which is covered with a greasy-like substance. which is actually water repellent, and that's why you don't want to bath or clip out or overbrush a horse during winter. He can also control his own piloerection by moving muscles underneath his coat to puff up his hair. And as I already said, the best coat that you can give your horse is a layer of fat. The other way that a horse is built to resist cold is that he can actually generate his own body heat. During the day, our indoor stable or horse stall will actually run about the same degrees as outside, the same temperature. But when we put this guy in at night and close the doors, just by grazing down his own hay, he'll heat up the stable by about 6 degrees, which is why, if possible, you actually want to keep your horses stable together, because they'll keep each other warm by adding their own heat to the air temperature around them. How a horse does this is that he has a large digestive tract, which is where they generate a large amount of their heat, and they do this by metabolizing the fiber from their diet, and they can really efficiently regulate their temperature this way. So keeping them on a good supply of hay, so they have the option for non-stop grazing, is really important. Also, on his body, just the way that he's designed, he has a big block-shaped body, which is really good for retaining heat. On their legs, they have low muscle at the bottom of their legs, which requires a lower blood circulation. So the primary blood circulation is kept around the vital organs in the main part of their body. Another thing that's really cool is that they have long faces with long nasal passages, which causes the air to be warmed up as it travels to the lungs. So we have a horse injury to see to. I don't know the full extent of the injury yet, but we're going to see what we have. It's starting to snow and it's below 0, so the blood on his wound is actually frozen. Hey buddy. Let's see if we can see what's going on here. So here is his injury. Horses are notorious for leg injuries, so when dealing with a horse injury like this, some things that you can do before you decide whether it's necessary to call the vet are firstly to assess how lame the horse is. If he's not able to put weight on the leg, this will indicate the level of pain that you're dealing with. My horse here is happy to give me his leg and he was walking fine, so that makes me less concerned that the damage is severe. Secondly, you want to try to deduce how the injury occurred. Signs of blood and hair can be detected on fences and objects that might have protruding nails or sharp edges, and such items should be dealt with. But one reason I check is because if he injured himself on a particularly rusted or dirty object, then infection risk is going to be more likely. Thirdly, you want to check for a bad smell or any oozing, bleeding, swelling, and heat. This will give you an indication of how long ago the injury occurred and if any infection is present. And just as with any first aid treatment, we want to clean the wound to get a better look at the injury site. In this case, the appearance of all the frozen congealed blood made what was a small nick seem like quite a big puncture. Just a side note here on winter foot care, as you can see on the bottom of the foot there is some clumps of ice, and in the snow, wet snow can actually ball up like a snowball and freeze to the underside of the horse's hoofs, which makes it difficult for them to walk, and it can actually be a risk of him breaking his leg. And so one thing that you can do to help this during their turnout time is to paint any kind of oil or lubricant onto the sole of their hoof, and this will stop the snow from being able to stick while they are out in the field. So I got a piece off. It's just congealed blood with hair. These are hospital scissors, which is why they don't have a point on the end, so it's for cutting off bandages, but just means that there's no chance of making an injury. I think I need to get some water on it and clean it up and just see exactly the extent of the wound, because it's difficult while it's all frozen and covered in blood. Keeping on hand a saline solution is the best thing you can use for cleaning wounds, or you could make your own very dilute saline solution with salt and water. And if your horse is up to date with his tetanus vaccination and the wound is looking superficial, clean, and there are no signs of infection, then you can either put some antiseptic on and a foot wrap if you need to keep mud and flies off. But since it's the dead of winter right now, that's not a concern here. However, for wounds that seem jagged, they have skin flaps or they're deep, and the horse is showing signs of lameness and infection, I would always consult a veterinarian. Even having just a telephone consultation with the vet for triage directions is worth having that peace of mind. The worst thing that you can do is ignore it, even if it is a seemingly small cut.
The good news is that is actually the wound.
So while it might seem like an involved process keeping a horse and keeping him out of trouble, as with most things, prevention is better than the cure, and so knowing your animal and his needs is key to avoiding many of the issues that we hear about. When all is good and well with your equine friends, there is so much purpose that can be applied to the partnership, and I don't know what has more appeal in winter than getting to horsepower your sleigh through a winter wonderland.
From the valley to the border, from the river to the rolling hills, voices calling out from yesterday. And the old folks and the old ways and the laughing smile of a Geordie girl, she's the one who stole my